Welcome to the Casey Zavaleta podcast. This podcast is for those who are in pursuit of high performance and for those who are interested in living with intentionality. We'll explore the practices, habits, and mindsets that will help you to be better in your personal life and in your professional life. Your time and attention is a gift that I promise not to take for granted. Thank you for being here. For San Diego born and bred R&B singer, multi-instrumentalist, and producer Geminelle, music and healing are one and the same. Geminelle released her wellness-focused mantra loops in 2019 to transform her internal dialogue through the repetition of intentional language. Mantra loops elevates the universal teachings and affirmations that have always been present in Geminelle's music and have been used to transform the well-being of thousands of listeners. With Mantra Loops Volume 2 now released, as well as collaborations with Ted, Tony Jones, Lizzie Jeff, and D-Smoke, Geminelle continues to spread light and bridge communities through music and through the curation of wellness-focused spaces by way of the company that she co-founded with her husband, Dom, called Arise Wellness. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Geminelle this week.
I feel like the earliest memory I have of music is like not even my memory. I feel like it's my mother's memory of me and music and like the story that she would tell of me like singing around the table, and the song was Skidamarinky Dinky Dink to like one of those TV shows. I feel like I've heard that story so many times that like it became a memory that I can like visualize and see. Yeah, that's probably my earliest memory. If I had to think about like what my personal earliest memory is, there were a couple of competitions that I had. And like, I remember being in these singing competitions and learning how to be on a stage and learning how to be a performer. The one that I remember actually is like the one that I lost. I just remember being like heartbroken about it. And that was when I really knew that I was passionate about music, you know, and it was like something that I really cared to do well and like be a performer, not just like sing and like write music, but like study the craft, like learn it, be like a professional, you know. Thinking back to that moment and just realizing like up until that point, it felt like competitions were fun and like games. And even though I had lost at certain times, it was always to somebody that I felt like was like a stronger competitor. And then at this point I had lost and I had felt like I had done like my best. It was like my best performance yet. And I just knew in my heart I was going to win, and I didn't. And I remembered that moment I was like, oh, I'm really passionate about this. Like, this is something I really want to do well. That was the thing that like really gave me the spark.
It's so good to hear that you were able to take, you know, what you could classify as a failure. You lost, right? And you were able to take that and allow that to propel you forward.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people, when they face failure, you know, maybe for the first time, they shy away from it and they allow the fear to take over, as opposed to leaning into the courage of saying, this is giving me information that I can get better. And also interesting, I'm really passionate about this thing.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't even realize how much that moment had an impact on my like long lasting life. Cause I feel like, you know, I really took that lesson of like a loss can be a lesson, you know, and where is the blessing in that? I feel like that's been a theme throughout my life of like, how do I find the blessing in this moment that maybe doesn't feel so good, you know? What's in it for me?
Where else has that shown up for you?
It's shown up in relationships. This person and me are no longer as close as we were, and it feels like a loss, you know? It's like a type of grief almost too. It's like you're separating from this person, or even just like a goal you may have had that like, it's not working out for you, you know? And it's like, maybe you needed to pivot. I think that those are some of the lessons that I've brought home from those losses. Like, okay, this person maybe isn't meant to go with you on your journey. You know, you hear that like people are for a reason, not a season, or like a season, not a reason sometimes. I think it happens all the time. Like it's something that's kind of frequent.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because we try to like construct a certain, story for ourselves. I'm heading in
Mm-hmm.
this direction and I have these goals and I think that these are going to be the people that are surrounding me.
Yeah.
And that's very like cerebral. It's very
Mm-hmm.
planned. It feels good as a human. Like we feel like, we have some control over it. But of
Yeah.
course, life hands us those moments when we realize maybe that's not really where we're headed. Maybe that's not where we're meant to go. Maybe it's not these
Yeah.
people that are going to support us to get where we need to be. And so to be able to like onboard those losses and almost like accept that maybe there's a different story ahead. Maybe there's something
Mm-hmm.
different coming ahead, I think is super important, but just really, really challenging. It's something that
Yeah.
I have a lot of struggle with personally. So it's cool to hear
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I think it's a special kind of surrender, that you
Mm,
have to tap into to embrace the fact that this idea that you had about your life is not what was actually written for you. But I've noticed in my own path, every single time that I have surrendered to that, like that change, it turns out so much better than I thought.
right?
And like it just flows so much smoother. And so I'm in this space of like, whenever I feel like I'm getting to that point of like, what am I holding on to too tight? That's the thing that I need to let go of and like allow to figure itself out.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and you're a mom.
Mm.
Motherhood teaches you that. Like labor teaches you that. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's all like this labor of life, I guess.
Mm. Let's talk about mantra loops because I have a feeling that a lot of these things that we're touching on have like culminated or have ended up into those songs and those words.
Yeah.
We have 2 volumes of mantra loops now, both of which I love. Volume 2 was
Mm,
released a couple of months ago, maybe like
yes.
4 months ago now.
Like two months ago.
Okay, a couple
Yeah.
months ago. Um, tell us about the inspiration for mantra loops. Um,
Yeah.
where did
Ooh.
where did those come from? I'm sure that's like a huge question for you.
Yeah, and it's a cool question. We'll just start with the conception of mantra loops, right? I went to a sound healing. It was my first sound healing. I'd first, like heard about sound baths, never been to one, and I was like, I want to check this out. And this woman had cultivated this really beautiful space. She had this giant gong and she curated this space. And she asked us when we came in really early. She asked us to set an intention. And I set the intention that I wanted my voice to be a voice that the people needed. That was my intention. Because I've been making music for so long and I just kept feeling like I feel like I've always made great music, but I wasn't reaching people. And at the time, a lot of that music was about things that I had been through, heartbreaks or like those trials that we talked about, those losses, but they were from a place of telling those stories of losses. And I wasn't reaching people.
Mm.
And so I set the intention that my voice be a voice of the thing that people needed. And maybe like 2 days later, I was talking to someone who was like, if you want to like make it big in music, you got to do something really catchy for like IG. And I was like, okay, I could make these loops, right? And then I was driving in my car and I was like beating on the dashboard and I was making these loops and I started saying, my success is inevitable. And my success is inevitable was a mantra that I had been using. The very first mantra that I was really like, I'm going to use a mantra and I'm going to say this until I believe it, right? My success is inevitable is what I would say every time I'd enter a room and start to feel self-conscious about if I belonged in that space. Like when I'm seeing like these other artists and these people who are like, they've been professionals for a long time. And I'm like, oh my God, do I belong here? I would say my success is inevitable. And it would like release this feeling of, I'm going to get to my success, like no matter what. I don't have to think about if I'm going to make the right move in this next situation to like get there.
Mhm.
And I started singing, my success is inevitable. My success is inevitable. And I was like, that's it. I got to like write mantras on a loop. It was really like this moment of like something simple where I didn't have to write a whole like, 16 bars or whatever. And like something simple that I could do and play on social media what I didn't know is what that journey would like do for me. You know, when I started singing these mantras, I started feeling challenged by them. So when I would say the joys in the work, then like all of a sudden I'm getting tasked with all this work, and it's like, oh, I don't want to do all that. That's begrudging. I don't want to, like, those are the feelings I would have. And those mantras would replay as reminders that that wasn't the feeling that I needed to like focus on. You know, I think one of the hardest ones was like, I forgive myself and I release. I was like, oh, like, how do I sing that and really mean it? And the same woman that gave me that sound bath, right? She asked me, she was like, what like meditation do you put yourself in to be able to translate these messages authentically? And at the time, I wasn't thinking about that. I was still just trying to make music. And when she asked me that question, it made me really sit with the idea that like, if I'm going to put this music out as a tool, as medicine, I need to be in that space. And so what started off as this like social media thing ended up turning into this journey of learning how to transform the way that I think and the way that I speak to myself. And it ended up being a much bigger project than I had thought it would be. You know, it became a bigger moment in my life for me. And I would go and I would sing and I would perform these songs, and I'd be like, my energy is infinite. And then like on the back end, I'm complaining about being so tired and this and that. And the people who are around me that knew the song would be like, no, girl, your energy is infinite. And it started like coming back to me as these lessons. And when I finished it, I just looked back at it and I was like, I don't even care what happens with this. Like, this moment was so much bigger than the music that came from it. It was a transformation of the way that I speak to myself, the way that I love myself, the way that I show up for myself, the way that I align myself with things. Like, it just gave me a new breath of life. And what was cool about it was I intended to be the voice that the people needed. And I put that project out right before 2020. And it became this huge thing that people were using as a tool to get them through the pandemic. And every time I think about that and the intention that was set that day in that sound bath and what was birthed from it, I'm like, wow, that was more powerful than I could have even imagined. You know, with Mantra Loops Volume 2, I was like, well, what mantras am I breathing into this chapter of my life 4 years later or 3 years later, you know? Mantra Loops Volume 1 really helped me become who I am as a more intentional person. And Mantra Loops Volume 2, it's a practice to always get you back to a state of being embodied. It's hard sometimes to say I'm proud of who I am, depending on what you've gone through. But like, it's a practice of becoming embodied. It's a practice of taking those words and really like feeling them. You may not feel them like every single day, but there's a way for you to get back into the rhythm of it. And that was the intention for Volume 2. So that's what's inspired the movement of Mantra Loops.
So powerful. It's so interesting as I hear you describe it, because you've kind of created a loop. You're creating music that you're putting out that you thought was for others, but in reality, it's coming back to you. And in continuing to create it, you're changing people, but you're also changing yourself. You're creating what others need and what you need. It's just this like beautiful loop of energy that's happening there.
Yeah. The Mantra Loops is part of the logo is an infinity symbol.
Yeah.
So it's that idea that it's like, you know, people were feeding me back my medicine when I didn't believe it. You know what I mean? I'm like, wow, okay. And it would be annoying sometimes, you know, it's like, I'm sure. I just want to be in my feelings.
Right.
But it's good to have that like reminder that you don't have to sit in your feelings forever. You know what I mean? You don't have to spiral. You don't have to let it grow. You know, you can shift your focus. You can, you know, put your energy somewhere else.
Yeah. The words are powerful. Absolutely. I watched the TED performance that you sent over, and it was beautiful. I loved it. And the two words that just kept coming up for me were grounded and centered. Girl, you were You were in some kind of like peaceful place on stage, and it was just so beautiful to watch. I'm curious, you talked a little bit about when you were asked if you had like a meditation practice or a way to kind of like get into the space where you could speak the words and believe them and have there be like truth and like the right energy behind them. And I absolutely saw that in that performance. So can you tell us a little bit about if you have some sort of like pre-stage ritual? Like, how do you get into that
Oh,
place that we
that's a
saw?
great question. I do kind of have a ritual. I think for TED specifically, I loved working with TED. Oh my gosh. So there's TEDx, and those are the folks that hold like the smaller conferences. This was TED Women. It's one of their bigger conferences. And wow, what a production. They do their thing. They are amazing.
Been doing it for a while, and they're some of the best. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was really, really beautiful production. They really took very good care of us. So when you say grounded and centered, yeah, when I think about that performance, like I didn't have to think about anything. They fed me, they took care of makeup, like I took care of my own hair. But like other than that, like they were there, and sound check was amazing. They made me feel really comfortable. It's really important for me to feel like I can be myself on stage. So it's like a practice of getting things out of the way that make me not feel like myself, you know? And then I have to warm up my lungs first. And so usually I do that through some form of exercise, yoga or like run. And I think that also helps me to get out of my head, whatever feelings I'm feeling or whatever things I'm processing. Cause life still be lifing, even sometimes the day of a show, like things will happen. And, you know, I got to kind of like get myself ready to be able to be myself on stage. And that sometimes requires questions of like, how vulnerable you feeling like being today? You know what I mean? Like, do you feel like you want to share that you're going through something and like this is also therapeutic for you? Where do I want to take this journey? You know, like I used to do like a lot of smaller performances, like so far sounds and things like that. And I would sometimes just not go in with a set list and feel out the vibe of the people and then just be like, I'm just going to play, you know? And lately I've been putting together more intentional sets. Like what stories do I want to tell? What like lesson do I want to leave people with? And that's been a really cool practice of like monologuing, like, okay, what do I feel like saying? What do I want to say? And that's been even a fun process too. I love being on stage. Like there is something so powerful about being amongst the people, like being amongst the community, and like helps you connect with the music a little bit better. You can feel who can feel it, you know what I mean? Who's been there, or, you know, who has experiences that resonate with yours. And so I feel like I used to feel like I couldn't always tell my most authentic stories. I was having a hard day. And it's like, I'm feeling self-conscious about something that happened during that hard day. You know, you don't always want to be on display during those times. Do you put that aside for a moment? And how do you authentically put that aside? Like you have to actually work through that. Because if I go onto a stage feeling self-conscious about like an emotion that I'm experiencing, that's going to translate in my performance and me feeling self-conscious about like, oh, do I sound okay? Or do I look weird? How's my outfit? You know what I mean? So, and then I think that separates me from being able to connect with the people who are there to see me. It's like, how do I just be centered, and how do I be grounded? And how do I show up authentically?
When I'm on stage, and I am someone who used to be I was a dancer growing up. And so if I'm on stage to move, I actually love it and don't feel anxious. I feel very like confident in that.
Yeah.
But when I'm on stage to speak, which is something that I've been like working on over the last, I don't know, 3 to 5 years or so, I did used to have like a ton of anxiety about that. And one thing that I found made a huge, huge difference was taking my attention off of myself and what I'm trying to say and how I sound or how I look, and putting it on the people that I'm speaking to. What am I trying to translate to them? Can I look them in the eyes and just say what I need to say to them? Just the self-consciousness floats away, and all of a sudden you're having a conversation, as opposed to something where you're like in this isolated performance space. those that feel a lot of anxiety are really in this sort of like, it's almost like there's a wall between them and the audience, versus when you're willing to share your energy with the audience and engage, I find it actually takes a lot of that anxiety away, which might be counterintuitive, but that's been my experience.
Yeah, no, and I think that's dope because it's like we're all reflections of each other, you know? So it's like when you can kind of like tap in with those people, it's like a more open space, you know? So yeah, I feel that.
What is a lesson that you've learned from music that translates into business?
Ooh. I think I'm learning in business how to jam. like like as if it was music, you know? It's like I think sometimes like business feels a little more personal because it's like your livelihood.
So you're saying that business for you feels more personal than music.
Sometimes because music, I think no one has
Mm.
ownership of music. Music is like a spirit, you know what I mean? It's like
Mm.
this thing that moves through every single person. Like even if you can't hear,
Mm.
music can move through you. It's a vibration. So I don't feel like there's any ownership over music. But with business, it's like, this is my brand, this is my legacy. I think I have a little bit more of a guard up around it. But with music, like I've learned to jam and to be like open to like that maybe off note that we might get to pull back this way and like play with it and mold it more joyfully.
Mm.
And I'm learning now how to do that with my brand and my business. And it's been challenging, I think,
Mm.
in the past because I wasn't like as much as I thought I was being collaborative, like I wasn't being collaborative. That sounds cool-ish, but no. you know, where now I'm like, okay, you can have your direction, you know, and you can have like your vision, but you got to let people work how they're going to work, you know? And so that
Mm.
requires you to be more in a jam space of like, oh, yeah, I like that idea. And I could see it working like this. Like, how do you feel about that? And like being more open to letting the synergy become the synergy. And music absolutely taught me that. Like, that's a skill set that I for sure got from being in a musical space.
Makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. I love it. Learning to jam in your business. I'm going to take that
yeah.
one. That's good. Um, Collaboration is a really interesting one because I think that some art forms, some spaces, some business spaces lend themselves to collaboration a lot more than others. I really enjoy writing, but writing seems to me to be a very sort of solo art form, solo
Yeah.
experience, something that's in my own little world that I'm trying to say to a page. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
music, wow, music lends itself to collaboration in so many different ways. And,
Yeah.
when you put different instruments together, different voices together, it truly does become something like bigger than itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like, what do you think makes for a good collaboration?
Ooh. Um, I feel like making music with someone is very similar to like it's not as similar as I would have said it before I had a kid, but like you're making a child with somebody, you know what I mean? Like you're creating a baby music with somebody, you know? Who do I actually want to create that energy with? You know what I mean? What am I trying to say with this song? What makes a good collaboration is two people kind of being in a similar space of time and energy, right? So I'm going to be like so intentional about writing the life that I want for myself through this
Mm.
music, right? And I decided to collaborate with these folks because of their message and their life, like who they are as people. And that was important to me because I'm making this musical child and putting it into the world. I think there has to be an understanding of like the messaging with people. I think knowing that the person that I'm working with is on the same mission as me to be like, we're going to
Mm.
help these people change the way that they think and feel we're going to put this vibration into the world that's going to be positive. It's like when you put atoms together and they make an explosion, it's like that is what that kind of collaboration feels like. So I think that's what makes a good collaboration. I think jamming, like I mentioned before, makes a good collaboration, allowing it to get fun and not so serious and like be explorative. I had a good jam with some friends that were on Mantra Loops Volume 2 the other day. There was a lot of goofing off and like a lot of laughing, but then we ended up finding this amazing vibe and we wrote a beautiful song together. And I think that is what makes for a good collaboration. I always think of the studio as such sacred space. Like when people come into a studio together, it's like they kind of like let their walls down.
It's interesting that you say that just entering the studio and entering that space kind of does it. Because I wanted to ask you, what do you think are like the fastest ways to get to that place, that creative loss of inhibition, where you're not like thinking, you're not in your head so much, you're not in that self-conscious space. Like, how do you enter that with someone if it's not walking into the studio?
Yeah.
Are there any like tools that you use or you've seen others use that you think like get you into that space faster?
Yeah. Lately, the mantra that I use to just get myself out of the way is I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to protect. I have nothing to prove. That's actually a mantra that I got from this woman, Lisa Nichols. And she would say that she would use that mantra to help her just remind herself to whatever's on your shoulders, like let it roll off, and that's something that I use whenever I'm feeling like tight. It's like a sensation, it's like this tightness in your neck. And like when I'm feeling like, oh, like, am I breathing right now? I try not to take myself so seriously too. Like I try to be okay to laugh at myself. Yeah, these musicians, they've been playing music in a jazz quartet for I don't know how many years. Like they're super technical. And I'm like, I've never really committed to a lesson in my life. And I'm just going to tinker around here until something feels good, and it's like being okay to be okay in that space. I know myself enough to be okay with myself, regardless of what the space says.
Do you ever use movement? Do you ever move through that like energy that you feel is stuck?
Well, yeah, kind of. Like I'll take a walk and like I'll just like breathe. That's totally movement. But I could probably shake it out more and swing my arms or something, like just like move energy around. I think that would be a good practice for me to implement. So I'm gonna try that.
There we go. Nice. That's my go-to. It's just like, that's how I move through stuff. I feel something tense. I could be on a meeting or whatever, whether it's shaking it out or just like finding like space with my arms, like that is what allows me to get into that space. So not right or wrong. I was just curious if that's something that you use also. And breath is a form of movement. So you said that,
Yeah.
You founded Arise Wellness with your husband, Dom. And my understanding is that your goal is to create these spaces, retreats, events that help people live their healthiest and fullest lives. I'm sure you can tell us in your own words, what your intention is with that. But I'd love to hear a little bit about Arise Wellness and the inspiration for creating it. Like, what did you see that people were needing and that Arise brings for them?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. Around the time of the pandemic, I feel like Dom and I we were doing really well. Like we were able to manage our emotions very well. We had realistic expectations about what quarantining was going to look like for us. We had our own little like oasis. And I realized, or both of us kind of realized during that time that we had that on our oasis because of the spiritual practices and routines that we had already had in place before the pandemic. We didn't have any trouble being with ourselves or sitting with ourselves. I think had the pandemic happened maybe like 2 or 3 years before, it would have been very different, but we were able to really sit with our emotions. We were able to like really sit with just the reality of life and not let it impact us like negatively, mentally or emotionally. a lot of the people around us, we noticed, were struggling with, you know, their thoughts, their internal dialogue, their how they felt about things, being lonely, sitting with themselves, sitting still, you know. That was what inspired us to kind of just start sharing, like, okay, these are some things that have worked for us. We got invited a really beautiful space in San Diego called Courtyard. And Courtyard hosts these big festivals and concerts all the time. And they offered for us to be able to host these intimate gatherings in the morning outdoors during the pandemic, to kind of just like do whatever we wanted to do. We had the space for free. It was kind of like, what can we offer? And so my husband and I started these events called Sunday Solstice. And Sunday Solstice was a concert and conversation series centered around wellness. And so, you know, one time we had this woman come and talk about conscious eating and like what that looks like. And there were times when me and Dom would just kind of live podcast and talk about like what it took for us to be in a healthy marriage and relationship. And then we would have these workshops with people where, you know, we would give them an assignment, and we started calling it collective self-work. To give some backstory to, my husband founded a company, Tunnel Vision Creative Agency. Tunnel Vision Creative Agency is like the business that houses Arise. And so we were producing concerts, art shows, festivals, and all of this stuff in New York prior to the pandemic. When we came back to California, we started Sunday Solstice, and that was kind of what birthed this idea of Arise. And so we got invited to produce a retreat for this company's school board partners. We were like, that's cool, but can we also like do these wellness sessions? And so we started these wellness sessions in the morning, and we did like this, you know, like a yoga and intentional language workshop. We did like a workshop on like forming your own mantras. We did a workshop on just moving through, like moving your body to the music and like releasing whatever energy, you know? And it was so fulfilling. It was like this moment where all of the things that we've done as creatives, as entrepreneurs, and both Dom and I were also educators. It was like this culmination of things that came together, combined spirit, it combined educating, it combined production, it combined the art. And it became this like really beautiful like nugget of we can do it all. We can do it all in this one thing. And so Arise's intention is to help people make space for their greatness by just tuning into more self-awareness. Because as much as they teach us in schools, they don't teach you how to be self-aware, you know? They teach you how to research, they teach you how to remember, you know? But like, this is like a different level of self-awareness that allows you to just live more freely and live more well. That was the seed that started Arise, and it's a beautiful company. We bring like a wellness wing and an experience to your professional development. And it's been beautiful partnering with folks, and especially like working with higher level folks, because that's going to trickle into their businesses.
The spaces that it sounds like you're creating are so cool, and definitely spaces where like I would want to be. I hope I get to attend one at some point.
Yeah.
Why is it important to be self-aware? What does that bring for people when they gain more self-awareness?
Let me take a breath before I answer that. It's a big question.
It is. Maybe let's start here. How would you define self-awareness?
Oh, self-mastery, I think, is like the best way to define self-awareness. And for me, like finding self-awareness was so important because, my gosh, like in the ways that I thought I was a victim, I was able to realize that I can be a victor. I don't have to be a victim. Without self-awareness, I was creating so many narratives around my life, and I was creating scenarios that were not true and were not happening. I was worried about things that hadn't happened. I was self-conscious about stuff. And it's like that self-awareness allowed me to see myself so honestly. Before I was self-aware, I just kept running into the same issues. And it was because I was running in circles around the actual like clarity that I needed about why I was doing those things, why I kept making those mistakes, like what was my life motif around this particular area. And so self-awareness gave me the gift of choice. Self-awareness gave me the gift of just like being able to see things without a layer of judgment, you know, to really like accept the moment in the most present moment and be able to like build my next step from there. I think that's why it's important to have self-awareness, because a lot of us are moving through life without knowing that we're fumbling over things, you know, or we're so accustomed to fumbling, we don't even realize that like the thing that you're tripping over, all you got to do is pick it up and throw it away, you know? And yeah, and it's like life became more simple when I became more self-aware.
Yeah, it's almost like bringing light to the belief systems and the storylines that are dictating your life, the decisions that you're making, your thought processes. Like when you can see those for what they are and almost separate you, like your true self, from those narratives that you're creating, that's when this like clarity, this freedom comes that you're speaking to. I think you explained that so well. It's released from those belief systems.
Yes.
Yeah. It's huge.
I just really got to a space where I'm like, yeah, that problem I'm dealing with, that's my fault. You know what I mean? Like that one's my fault. I created that. You know, and I literally just got to that space like maybe like a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I'm so proud of myself. I figured out that I'm the problem and I'm changing it, you know, and I'm making a step to actively change it. So that's a cool feeling.
Here's the golden question. How do you get there? How'd you do it?
Get there?
What do you think contributed?
I think this conversation has been a lot of the steps that I've taken to get there. You know, it's the breath. It is checking my narratives and replacing my narratives with tools like mantras to help me like reprogram and deprogram and reprogram. Like, what do I need to get rid of? You know, this operating system doesn't work anymore for me. And then surrender to the fact that like you are doing the work. Yeah, like I feel like you brought out a lot of the self-work in this conversation. You know, knowing that you have choice, I think is so important, because we feel as a society, as a people, like we're under the foot of the man all the time, you know, but we have choices. There's a lot of different ways we can focus our attention and our energy. There's many different ways to pivot. And so I think knowing that you have a choice, knowing that you don't have to follow this structure, this guideline that we've been taught our whole lives, you can do different things. And I think that's the beauty of, you know, the era of life we live in. I feel like this is the most resources and probably the most freedom that anybody has ever received in a lifetime. And so we have to be able to use it, you know.
What did you say earlier? You said it's changing from victim to victor.
Yeah.
Like transcendence of that victimhood that's so easy to get stuck in. I feel like one thing that helps me a lot when I'm facing some of the like biggest challenges is a reminder just to like ruthlessly accept what is, like acceptance. And you said surrender. I love that too. Like what is in the now, like I cannot change it. And so any stress or I don't know, any of those like heavy negative feelings that are coming from that are actually my resistance to what is. So if I can just say, like ruthlessly say this, it is what it is. And now I get to choose, like you said, choose how to move forward. Oh my gosh. Like some of the biggest challenges that I faced, especially in motherhood, to be honest, I feel like it's made it so much easier. There's a lot of need for like self-awareness baked into that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because having a kid will teach you about yourself.
What's changed for you since you've become a mom?
What's changed for me since I become a mom? You know, it's interesting because I feel like I became a mom maybe when I got pregnant. You know, it's like I feel like that was where the changes happened. But I think that I just want to be better. You know what I mean? Like that's something that I feel, and it's like I have someone who is literally looking up to me. Like I'm the youngest kid in my family, so like I've never had that feeling of like, oh, someone's looking up to me.
Yeah.
But I feel that deeply now, you know, and it's like I want to be a good example for that. And that just requires me to be more conscious of the decisions that I'm making every day. I got to make really good choices now, you know, and it's not just
Mhm.
for me, you know, and I think that that's the biggest change is like I'm doing it for the family, and that's so special because my partner and I we are a partnership, but we are also very independent people, you know, and we're interdependent and we're independent. And I think that
Mm.
now it's like we're bound as a family, and I think that that is such a special most like so beautiful, you know, it's so beautiful. There's this thing that like connects us by blood, and I feel so like honored to just be like able to be like this is the family though, this is for the family. So
Mm.
yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. Like it's like this switch in my head where I'm like, oh, like I'm doing this for other people now, this is really cool.
Good things happen when you have purpose beyond yourself,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Just this sense of something larger, which allows you to let the small stuff go so much easier.
Oh yeah.
The small little annoyances, it's like, wow, my perspective on them is totally different. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it doesn't even
Exactly.
matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your go-to mantra right now?
Ooh, what was my mantra today? I'm like, I feel
Mm.
like it changes every day depending on how I'm
Okay.
feeling. The joy is in the work. That was the mantra that I had to use today because I gave my dog a bath. We have a big dog. And giving him a bath means you got to clean up some other stuff after. Like you got to clean the bathroom. You got to, you know, it's like a thing. It's a whole thing. And so that was the mantra that got me through it. Like the joy is in the work. And now we have like the best smelling dog, and it's amazing. It's such a treat.
Beautiful. Yeah. Nice. I love that.
Yeah.
It's like a perfectly mundane example to like show why these mantras are so powerful,
You
right?
know?
You don't want to freaking clean the smelly dog. I love
Yes.
it.
Oh man.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite mantra loop, or is that like asking you to name your favorite
Ah,
kid? Is that like
I do.
you
I have
can't?
a favorite from each project. So
Okay.
my favorite from volume 1 is everything I need is already inside. I
Mm.
feel like that's one of those mantras that you can use any day, every day, all the time. And then right now, Divine Assignment on volume 2 just resonates with me so much. And I think too, because I've been singing Divine Assignment for a couple of years now in performances, but it was a very different tune. It was like a little slower and like, you know, it's like not as excited to receive your assignment as I am in this volume 2 version. And I think that that charges me up differently now. Also, Divine Assignment has Mana's heartbeat tucked into the very, very end of the song. And I didn't know that it was going to be there. And the producer who I worked with, his name is Provident. I worked with him for 10 years. He produced all of Mantra Loops, and we worked with an artist, DK, who produced Divine Assignment and More Than Enough. But Provident engineered the entire thing, and he mixed it and like did the vocal thing, moved everything around. And we gave him Mana's heartbeat a long time ago, and I was just like, we'll put it in one of the songs, and we just never did it while I was there. So when he sent me the final mix of Divine Assignment and I heard the heartbeat, I just got so teary eyed, and like I hadn't had the baby yet. I didn't know I was having a son. I didn't like there were so many things, but I knew that baby's heartbeat, and I just heard the baby's heartbeat at the end, and I was like, wow, like that. It just made the moment so real. You know, it's like that is my divine assignment. He is my divine assignment. Having Mana helps me stay deeper in my alignment, and that's a really beautiful thing. And so like that right now, divine assignment is my absolute fave on Mantra Lose Volume 2.
Love it. Do you have any ideas for your next album? Or are we like too recent off of
Do
the last release?
actually, yeah.
Yeah.
So the first tour that I ever went on was like a self-funded, self-managed tour that I went on. I called it the Acoustic Love Letters Tour. And I put out this EP on SoundCloud. called Acoustic Love Letters. And it was all of these like love stories that I had written, you know, and I recorded it myself. It was my first time ever like having studio equipment, like recording. And I put out this project and I took it on tour. And now there's so many love stories, right? So like there were stories about Dom, there were stories about heartbreaks, you know, but now there's all these stories about my relationship with Dom. And Dom and I have known each other for, oh my gosh, it's been like it'd be 24 years this year, as friends. And like, you know, we've evolved through partnership, but we've known each other for a long time. I've always had a thing for him. So I have all these songs that I've written, but I have this vision of piecing together all of those songs into like a freshly produced, freshly mixed, remastered like version of Acoustic Love Letters. And so that is the next project that I am going to work on. So many people ask us like, how do you get a love like this? You know, and I think there are so many stories in there that'll speak to the values that we instilled in our own relationship to have a love like the love that we have. And so I think that it in a way will, you know, kind of be like a volume 3, but it won't be mantra loops, but it you know, it'll have some of those same like life lessons and principles and teachable moments. And I get excited when I think about it because some of this music is so amazing. And I feel like it's going to be so fun to share it with everybody.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Casey Zavaleta podcast. If you are organizing an event that's oriented around health and wellness, or you're booking corporate wellness sessions for your company, and you're interested in having me come and speak at that event, please reach out at caseyzavaleta.com/contact. If you enjoyed this episode of the show, I would hugely appreciate if you could take 10 seconds and leave a 5-star rating on the show. I would even more hugely appreciate if you could take 30 seconds and leave a quick review on the show. It helps to spread the word to more listeners about the podcast. If you would like to receive notifications about episode drops, or if you're interested in actionable insights related to podcast content, be sure to subscribe to my newsletter. You can do that at caseyzavaleta.com/subscribe. Okay, everyone, that's it from me this week. Thanks so much for listening. I look forward to seeing you back next Wednesday for the next episode of the show.